I'm going to go through some sort of useful tips when you are doing sort of video editing, which is nice. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly talk to you first about keyboard shortcuts and what they mean, basically. So obviously, as you know, video editors and film editors, you know, a lot of anything to make our process quicker is welcomed, because it's a very sort of lengthy practice of reviewing the footage, organizing the project before you even start editing, and then when you're actually in the thick of editing, it obviously speeds up your workflow. So if you go up to the Premiere Pro tab and you go into keyboard shortcuts, as you can see, this basically brings up an entire sort of key sort of layout for what all the tools do and sort of why they're useful. Now, as you can see here, I've got a keyboard layout preset, which is called Rory keys. And basically the reason I've done that is because this is mine. You know, I've been using this tool for a really long time, so I like to set up mine in a way that suits my workflow to make it faster. But what you can actually do is, say if you, like me, will learn on a different editing tool, what you can actually do is you can set that. So originally when I was at university, I learned on Final Cut Pro 7. So if you're coming into this tool, they've actually made it really handy for users of the different editing tools to actually be able to just work within this framework and feel comfortable within it. So you've got the Final Cut Pro 7 keys there. So look, if I change that, it changes all the keyboard shortcuts within Premiere. And then also they've got Avid Media Composer 5, which is another tool that I used to use. And then obviously you've got the Adobe Premiere Pro defaults, which looks like this. Or you can have, your own keys. And basically down here, this is where you can type in a name of something. So here's everything, here's all these can be keys, all these different things, exporting frames, expand all tracks, multicam cameras, all of that type of stuff. You can set all of this yourself. Now, it's always good to obviously remember and just get used to it. I commonly recommend that if you're starting from scratch, you just work within the basic Adobe Premiere Pro keys. And then as you move forward in your careers, you'll be able to adapt these keys to, the type of work you're doing and the workflow you use. If you're not someone who uses multicam footage a lot and works with that, you're not going to need certain tools that are, specific for the multicam editing, right? So those are the keyboard shortcuts, and there's some really good ones here. Like I like to have the G as my add edit, so I'll just quickly show you what that does on my timeline. So instead of pressing C to bring up, as you saw there, it brought up my razor blade tool, and pressing on the clip, going like this sort of throughout the clip. What I like to do is I much prefer just pressing a single key, so I like to just press G, right? So that's what I've set mine to, right? And it's the add edit tool. If you're wondering. And it's just super handy because what I can do is, say if I've got lots of video tracks on here, what I can actually do is I can go like this, select both and hit G, and it does a hard cut on both of the tracks on V1 and V2. So yeah, super handy one for if you're working with a lot of video tracks, which commonly you will be, going forward. Now, I'll just give you an overview of the timeline itself. So a useful tip, as you see what I'm doing there, scaling up and down, which is quite handy if I want to sort of zoom in on this footage and really see these waveforms or the start of this clip or whatever. What I can do is I can just hit the minus and plus on my keys, and it scales my timeline up and down. Now, another useful tool is the Command or Control, if you're on a Windows, plus. So what that does is it actually makes my video tracks a lot larger in scale. And now if I hold Alt and plus, it makes my audio tracks a lot larger in scale, which is super handy for if I'm doing some audio editing, I obviously want to see all the waveforms and see where this is starting, where it's stopping. Obviously here we've got a bit of a gap where I stopped speaking for a little while. But yeah, that's just a super one to know. So I'm always, I can always see what's going on, and I can see it closer in, which is nice. You can actually control the scale up and down using this. But again, as an editor, it's much better to use your keys and rely less on your mouse, just because it's a much faster editing workflow. Now, I'll just go through and talk to you about the tools over here, which we've got. So here's your sort of immediate tools within Premiere. So basically, obviously this is our selection tool, which gives us the mouse cursor, which basically allows us to sort of select stuff like this and click on it, and it just selects that clip, or we can select multiple ones and we can move them up and down the timeline or move them wherever we please. Now, this one is the track select forward tool, which is handy if you're trying to move a lot of tracks forward at the same time to create space, maybe for something at the beginning of the edit, which you want to put in, but you've already completed an offline sequence. So what I can do is if I just click on this, it selects all the clips going forward. If I just click on this, it only selects that one. So again, a handy tool if you're just trying to quickly make some space. Then we've got the ripple edit tool, which basically, it trims the footage and then snaps it back to whatever time code. I don't know if you saw there, but as you can see, the time code is going up there because what I'm doing is I'm cutting away some of the beginning, but instead of doing this way, where I just make a cut, I'll make a cut sort of here, and then I have to press V to get my selection tool and delete that, and then delete that space and bring it back. What I'm doing with the ripple tool is if I just press B on my keyboard, I'm automatically telling Premiere to take away that time in the time code that comes up in my sequence monitor, and then it's going to snap it back automatically for me. So again, that's a really handy tool, especially if we're doing stuff like this, where we want to trim a bit of what I'm saying, maybe up to the point here where I go quiet, and then this next clip here comes in. So it's just a lot smoother editing process again, and just makes your life easier when you're working with lots of different clips on a timeline. Now, let's say sort of a good technique as well for this, right, is you don't want to make hard cuts and then obviously just have no audio running underneath this, because we are editing an interview. So normally in this case, I would have music and maybe some sound effects all on these audio tracks to really just heighten the mood and sort of add value to everything I'm doing within this interview and just make it seem more cinematic and seamless. We're not going to do that for the purpose of this video. However, one useful tip I will say is that if you're going to make a cut to new footage, what's always a good thing to do is if you leave the audio underneath running. Now you don't always have to do this, but it just sounds a lot nicer. And obviously to hide harsh cuts, say if I like the beginning of what I'm doing here, right? So let me just get rid of that beginning bit, but then I want to only have this of me talking, but I don't want my sort of image here. I want a different image. So what I'm going to do is going to pull this back and have this overlying on top, so that basically as I'm talking, you just getting B-roll of me editing, and then I go back to my interview, and then what I'll do is I'll add in some more B-roll basically, and what it does is it covers the jump cuts, because that's what we don't want in this, right? So say if I delete that, but I actually turn this off. So if you want to turn off a single video track, by the way, you just press Command-Shift-E, and what it does is it just hides the track for now. You haven't deleted it from the timeline. You've just basically told Premiere Pro to hide it from your timeline, essentially, for now. Now, say if we have those out, obviously I've deleted a bit in the middle of this, you're going to see a jump cut, which for a viewer is going to look a bit harsh, right? So you see there, that's what we call sort of like a harsh cut. So where it's sort of, it hasn't naturally done it. It's kind of cut quite abruptly and quite quickly. Now, for some stuff like YouTube content and stuff, this can be forgiven, but if you're doing stuff for branded films, for advertising, for TV shows, or for feature films, this is the type of thing we want to avoid, which is why to hide the cut, which is good, we'll turn this back on, so Command-Shift-E on the same clip. And because obviously let me just drag this out as well. So obviously here's me beginning to talk. So I just play this through. So here's me sort of sat here, and then it cuts quite nicely there to me on the computer, and then I'll cut back to me talking. So you see it's covered the cut, so it's not as harsh to the spectators, which is nice. Yeah, that's the type of editing we want to do. Now, say if I want this clip to start with me sort of like this, and then I want it to go to my B-roll. But say if I want to stay on the B-roll for a bit longer, but I want to continue hearing me talking down here, what I'll do is I'll extend this shot out a bit. And then what I'll do is I will unlink this, So if you go up to here to unlink, and basically what that does is it makes the video and the audio two separate entities now. As before, it was all connected like what this one is. So everything that I do to the visual track changes on the audio track as well. However, now what I can do is I can just extend this and keep my voice, as you see here, going underneath that B-roll clip, right? So that's another cool technique, because as well, it just makes it, you don't want to, again, make the spectators or the viewers feel sort of recognize where you've cut. You want to do your best to mask it, basically, because that's the purpose of a film editor. It's part of our job to sort of hide cuts and make it as seamless as possible within our timeline.